The breaking news just 20 minutes ago, we've learned that Yemen and Sarla in Yemen announced that they targeted two Saudi oil tankers and with ballistic missile and drones. And so far, they have turned, they forced 10 Saudi oil tankers back to, you know, uh, to their to the origin, to the way that, it was from Saudi Arabia out or from outside to Saudi Arabia. They're putting a blockade on Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia has right now, after 12 years of the siege on Yemen, they're feeling the pain right now. And how do you see the way that they're going to respond to this sort of escalation?
What can Saudi Arabia do? Invade Yemen? Oh, they did that, and they're not winning. Bomb? Well, they've done that, and there's not a damn thing the Saudis can do. I mean, the bottom line is the Saudis need to be careful about, Yemeni escalation, because in addition to the blockade, which they've now imposed on Saudi Arabia, and people need to understand the blockade, what the importance of this blockade is that when the Iranians asserted control over the Strait of Hormuz, the Saudis rerouted 70% of their oil production to Yanbu, the port of Yanbu, and it sails through the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, which are now closed. So basically, Saudi Arabia is exporting zero oil, zero. And there's nothing they can do about it. Literally nothing they can do about it, because the Yemeni missiles will sink the Saudi oil tankers. What they can do is sue for peace, but we also have to remember what prompted this. This isn't the Houthi waking up and saying, "Well, we're going to play a geopolitical card today," out of nowhere. The Saudis imposed an aerial blockade on Houthi-controlled Yemen. They shelled, or they bombed an airbase, a Sana'a airfield, after an Iranian airliner took off and landed there with a Houthi delegation that was attending the funeral of Ali Khamenei. Saudi Arabia is 100% in the wrong. What's even more amazing is that President Donald Trump encouraged the Saudis to bomb Yemen. Any rational actor would know that that would have triggered a Yemeni response, which would have probably included the closure of the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, which they've done. So why did Donald Trump, allow Saudi Arabia to, enter such an obvious trap, especially when there's no solution to this? It raises questions about the viability of the U.S.-Saudi relationship. To be honest, that the United States might have a hidden agenda here, but the bottom line is that the Saudis are screwed. And this will be the end of Saudi Arabia if they don't reverse this, because without money, without oil, Saudi Arabia has no money, no economy. And right now, Saudi Arabia has no cards to play, none.
When you talk about the agenda in Washington, if I put myself in the shoes of Donald Trump and his administration, I would say, with the difficulties we are facing in the Strait of Hormuz and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, why would I have to support a strike on Yemeni airport? Because it was reported by Axios that Donald Trump supported Saudi attack on Yemen. Why would you want to do that if you're facing many difficulties in the Strait of Hormuz?
I don't know. Rationally, there's no reason for this. So we have to start thinking irrationally, and this is purely a product of supposition. There's no hard fact to back this up, but when you take a look at what's driving Donald Trump's actions, it's largely oil. We know that the first 39 days of conflict were halted because Donald Trump said we literally were running out of oil. We had to stop. We had to implement the MOU. J.D. Vance has openly acknowledged that the MOU was just a charade, basically a lie to buy time so that the West could replenish their oil stockpiles. So we know energy is the key. we also have to take a look at, the totality of the American effort. And there is some reason to believe that the Trump administration was seeking to use the conflict with Iran in an effort to gain, control over a major source of energy to China. We'd already done so through the capture of Maduro in Venezuela, and we were seeking to replicate this level of control in in Iran. And the goal there is to basically get the Chinese to be dependent upon oil supplies that America has the on-off toggle switch. And so you look at this and you say, well, maybe Donald Trump wants to further solidify American dominance of the global energy market by removing a competitor, removing Saudi Arabia from the fold. Again, this is highly speculative and I hope wrong, but I'm just trying to find a rational reason for this. I think that Donald Trump holds grudges. I think he remembers when the Saudis took umbrage at him claiming America was the dominant power, and they said Saudi Arabia will be the dominant power, going forward because of their, because of their energy dominance. So I'm speculating that Donald Trump could have been setting Saudi Arabia up to fail, to make Saudi Arabia more dependent upon the United States for security needs, and to create opportunities in the global market for American energy.
Then, what do you make of the recent comments about? Because many people are talking about how to deal with the pickaxe mountain in Iran, because it seems that they're deciding about if they're going to hit it and what would be that attack. Are they going to use, again, B-2 bombers to hit that mountain? How effective that could be? Even they're talking about maybe nuclear weapons they're going to use. What is your understanding of that sort of attack if they decide to do it?
This is a dangerous situation because the way that the Trump administration is framing the pickaxe target is in the form of a potential existential threat to the United States and the global community from an Iranian nuclear weapon that could be built in a reconstituted enrichment hall, reconstituted nuclear warhead design center, et cetera. If Trump is able to articulate convincingly that Iran poses a existential threat to the United States and its allies through the potential of possessing a nuclear weapon, and that it was derived from a nuclear program that the United States claims is weaponized, then I am fearful that we've just, from a doctrine standpoint, literally created a definition that's backed up by the nuclear posture review and the commander's guidance to the nuclear posture review, nuclear implementation plan, that permits the United States to use nuclear weapons. There's rumors that Donald Trump has, once, maybe twice, approached the Pentagon for permission to use, or not permission, but for them to draw up a nuclear strike option against Iran. And both times the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has rejected this, saying that it's fundamentally unconstitutional, these orders. But here we could see an effort to, use intelligence information to manufacture a threat that was adaptable to U.S. doctrine. And I am concerned about that. I'm not going to be dismissive. Nima, that I've said all along that the United States, if Iran, put their stuff in places that couldn't be destroyed, that the United States, would consider the use of nuclear weapons. Well, we know that Donald Trump has already considered the use of nuclear weapons. Now we see the potential for a scenario where he would, authorize the use of nuclear weapons and the military would concur. That's the danger of Pickaxe Mountain, because there's no conventional weaponry that can take it out. And if Donald Trump's creating a scenario of that has Iran developing a nuclear weapon, then logical, direction for U.S. policy is to destroy that weapon using whatever means possible, to include nuclear weapons, because this is doctrinally what our nuclear arsenal is all about. People took umbrage at this. They didn't like me saying this, but here we are. This is the exact scenario we face. I'm not saying that Trump's going to use nuclear weapons. I'm saying that the fact that you and I are having this conversation, underscores the danger of the moment, that there is the potential, there's a pathway to a cognizable justification for the use of nuclear weapons against Iran because of the the durability of pickaxe to conventional interdiction. And if we determine that Iran is putting in a viable centrifuge capability, that Iran has installed a nuclear warhead assembly plant, or pilot plant, that Iran could be days away from having a deliverable nuclear weapon, we may use a nuclear weapon ourselves.
How is that going to change the concept of using nuclear weapons or building nuclear weapons? How is that going to?
Well, this fundamentally alters everything. This is why it's so dangerous. I've used the argument I'm about to articulate. I haven't used it against the Americans. I've used it against the Russians. For those Russians who embrace Sergei Karaganov's, doctrine of preemptive strike to include nuclear weapons. Remember, in June of 2023, Karaganov published an article in which he, postulated the possibility of, attacking Poznan with a nuclear weapon, Poland, and that the United States would do nothing because it's not willing to trade Boston for Poznan. So that doctrine, he modified it in the days leading up to Victory Day celebration this year, where he said that he's not advocating a preemptive nuclear strike. He's advocating the use of Oreshnik, conventional weapons. And then if that doesn't work, if that doesn't break the back of the Europeans, et cetera, then and only then would nuclear weapons be considered. But he's talking about breaking the taboo on the use of nuclear weapons, using nuclear weapons in a non-nuclear environment. This would be the end of arms control, because the very premise of modern day arms control is the notion that nuclear wars can't be won, therefore they should never be fought. Therefore, weapons should never be used. Why did we come up with mutually assured destruction by banning the ABM treaty back in 1972? It's so that we level the playing field, so that all parties understand that if you start a nuclear war, there's nothing to defend against what the enemy is going to come at you, and we're all going to die. Therefore, let's not start a nuclear war. That if the United States were to use nuclear weapons against Iran, what do the Russians do? Because right now the Russians are embracing a nuclear doctrine premised on that basic fundamental concept. Nuclear wars can't be won, therefore they should never be fought. And yet, if the United States uses nuclear weapons, the Russian doctrine is immediately outdated, because the United States has now embraced a doctrine that says nuclear wars can be won, and we will use nuclear weapons preemptively. That's the new norm. So Russia will have to respond accordingly. At some point in time, Russia will have to show a willingness to, parallel the American policy. That's how you achieve strategic balance. And they would have to use a nuclear weapon against, a threat city. And who knows what they'd nuke? Maybe they'd nuke Poland. Maybe they'd nuke a Baltic state. But they have to nuke somebody so that they tell the Americans, we too have nuclear weapons, and we too will use them preemptively as a message to the Americans: don't mess with Russia. But every war game in the Pentagon that begins with a limited nuclear strike along the lines of what I've just discussed always ends with a general nuclear exchange that terminates all life on the planet. So this is the problem. With any use of nuclear weapons by night, the genie is out of the bottle now, and it will never go. It's like putting toothpaste back in the tube. You're just not going to do it.
Yeah. Just Scott, with what's going on as we talk, there are explosions happening in Kuwait. Kuwait is becoming the front line right now for for Iran. And the way that Iran is hitting at Kuwait is more than all the missiles and drones that they're sending to other countries in the GCC countries or outside GCC countries, naming Jordan. And why is Kuwait is that important for Iran to hit it so hard and this way?
Uh, I don't know if it's that it's important. I mean, the United Arab Emirates seems to be a more important target if you were going to be seeking to. I think it's because Kuwait is the least important of major targets, and that it is vulnerable to the kind of strikes that Iran is putting in right now. These strikes are designed to take out desalination plants and energy production. Desalination plants taken out mean you have no fresh water. Take out energy production. I'm talking about, energy power plants. You have no electricity for air conditioning, and um, life becomes unlivable. And so I think what uh, the Iranians are doing is setting the example, saying that there is a price to pay for continued bombardment of Iran, and Kuwait is providing a base for the launch of ATACMS missiles, by by the U.S. forces, and so Kuwait is clearly an enemy state. Iran is, I believe, setting Kuwait up for the total destruction of its major civilian infrastructure. That means there will be no ability to generate water from desalination. There will be no ability to generate um, energy from power plants, and then Kuwait dies as a state. Again, you and I have talked about this. I said that one of the things Iran has threatened to do prior to this conflict breaking out is to kill nation states. I think Iran is in the process of destroying Kuwait as a nation state. Um, maybe Bahrain will be targeted next. Who knows? I'm not doing Iranian targeting for them, but the point is, um, I think Iran is looking to weaken Kuwait and set the precedent so that when they say next is the United Arab Emirates, that the sheiks there sit up and go, whoa, 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 no, 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 we don't want any of this. What do we need to do to prevent our country from being destroyed? Because the reality is that there is no nation in the Persian Gulf that can defend itself against Iran. None. There's no air defense systems, nothing. So if Iran wanted to destroy them, Iran could destroy them. And the message that needs to be sent back to to the UAE and to Kuwait and to other Gulf Arab states is that you know we will destroy your nation. We will terminate you as a viable modern nation. And I think that's what is behind the Kuwaiti targeting. I don't think they've actually brought in nation killing strikes yet, but I do believe that they're setting Kuwait up for a terminal event. Um, and when it happens, it's going to be tragic for millions of people. But I think that's what's going on with the Russian bombardment of Kuwait.